Hi everyone, it's Stephen Broadley from Woodrow Mercer here. I sat down for a really interesting conversation with Dr Sylvana Storey exploring psychological safety in organisations. We talked about what it is, how to embed it, where people get it wrong, and the role of the leader in embedding psychological safety. You can check it out here, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
Hi Sylvana, how are you?
I'm great, Stephen. Thanks for inviting me on this to discuss psychological safety today.
Great, no, pleasure to have you on. And where are you joining me from today?
I guess like everyone else, I'm at home under lockdown. I know we're coming out soon, but I remain at home. I normally work at home anyway, so it hasn't been much of a major adjustment for me, fortunately.
Great, good stuff. And for those that aren't familiar with you as an individual and your expertise, could you give me a bit of a snapshot and everyone who's listening of your career to date and what you've been doing over the last few months, please?
Sure. So I began my life in neuropsychology and moved to business psychology. And then in terms of my career, I'm a change management consultant, drawing on the principles and practices of business psychology. I have worked both in-house for international banks and consultancies, and I've worked as my own boss, essentially heading up my own company. But always generally in a consulting role, in a change management consulting role, and that role is a intersection of culture, organizational culture, leadership, and employee engagement. Also drawing on diversity and inclusion in some points.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And over the last few months, what is it that you've been working on during this period?
Yeah, well, it's lockdown has certainly given me time to focus on my book, my second book. So my first book was looking at the impact of diversity and inclusion on global leadership performance. This one is looking at CEOs' behaviour and mindset. So I've been fortunate enough to interview a wide range of CEOs from Fortune 100 and FTSE 250 companies. And I'm hoping that comes out by the end of the year.
Fantastic. And I think that leads us really nicely onto what we wanted to talk about today for CEOs, business leaders. I think this is for everybody, not just for the people at the top. But we're talking today about psychological safety in organizations. So again, for those that aren't initiated in it, don't understand exactly what it is, would you be kind enough to enlighten us as to what psychological safety really is, please?
Sure. So the term was coined initially by Amy Edmondson. She brought it to life. Who's a professor of leadership and management at Harvard Business School. And psychological safety is where team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other, essentially. So it's a climate where people are comfortable expressing and being themselves. So in a psychologically safe environment, if you make mistakes, if you share concerns, or ask for help, you will not be thought less of. You will not be resented. You will not be humiliated. You will not be embarrassed. You will not be rejected. You will not be penalized. Okay, so that's the ideal psychologically safe environment. And particularly so in a psychologically safe workplace, people are not hindered by interpersonal fear. So they feel willing and are able to take risks and are candid. That is, they can be honest, they can be open, and as transparent as is appropriate.
I think in this current climate, it's so important. Perfect. Okay. And in terms of companies that don't practice psychological safety, what's the kind of the look, the feel of those organizations that do not practice it?
Right. So this is where we start to get really into the meat of things. And the word that encapsulates what you might hear or see or feel in organizations that don't practice psychological safety is toxic, at the extreme end. And of course, there's a spectrum of toxicity depending on the organization. But some general characteristics are it's handicapped by a culture of fear. It's an organization that's rife with politicking, employees who are sycophants, employees who always give the answer they think their boss wants to hear rather than the real one. The structure is extremely hierarchical, with roles, positions, titles, status is valued more than opinions, etc. It's a culture of temperamental leaders and frightened middle managers. It's a Cassandra culture. The term is called a Cassandra culture, where an environment of speaking up, where you speak up, is belittled and warnings go unheeded. So you'll often hear a boss say, "Don't bring me bad news," or individually, people don't feel socially safe to take a stand. People will follow the rule that if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. Most people will know when there's an elephant in the room, but no one has the courage to call it out. Decisions are stymied by groupthink. So, groupthink is when everyone comes together, instead of offering their different perspectives, everyone hones in on just the one perspective. Striving for consensus rather than action. So it's deliberately going around in a circle. So rather than making decisions, for example, we have to consult with A and B and C, and no constructive action ever happens. And as a result, when we hesitate to speak up, our health suffers. So the more we are unable to express ourselves truthfully, the more prone we are to experience stress and ultimate burnout. And it, of course, has implications with regard to attrition, sickness, absence leave, and even legal disputes. And unfortunately, a 2017 Gallup poll in the US found that only 3 in 10 employees strongly agree with the statement that their opinions count at work. So it's pretty. Our organizations at the moment are actually quite unhealthy in many ways, and speaking up, being able to speak up in that psychologically safe space tops it.
Look, I mean, the stat from Gallup there is quite alarming, isn't it? So, okay, so in terms of common faults of leaders in embedding psychological safety, what are some of the common faults that you'd see?
Okay, yeah. So there are at least 5. So first, leaders need to be cognizant of how difficult it is. So primarily, this is because they're in a position of power and have forgotten what it's like not to be so powerful. So people tell leaders what they want to hear, or worse yet, say nothing at all. So, and we know that silence is dangerous. We just have to look at the scandals at Volkswagen, at Wells Fargo, at the demise of Nokia, etc., to see what happens when employees don't feel safe to speak up. Also, environments that value status. So you understand what your position is in the hierarchy. Everyone understands what their position is in the hierarchy, and there are some organizational sectors that are more prone to this. So for example, in the medical sector, where you have junior doctors, consultants, surgeons, etc., professors, and one dare not speak above their own level. Or a number of plane crashes identified because the co-pilot did not feel that he could speak up to the captain, even though he knew what, or she knew what was wrong. So that's common fault, where status is, status and hierarchy override honesty and stability. Also, leaders say they want people to speak up, but then penalize those that do. So that is, they pay lip service to the practice of speaking up. They might label people who speak up as they're a bad fit, or they're negative, or she's a troublemaker, and so on. So they attach negative labels to these to people who speak up. Or they say, leaders who practice do as I say, not as I do. And we only have to go back a few weeks to the Dominic Cummings fiasco, just to see what can happen when a leader doesn't role model what they are saying they will do. And finally, leaders also need to be mindful of different organizational personalities and different country cultures. And what do I mean by an organizational personality? Just like you and me, one of us could be, gung-ho, backslapping, very loud. The other can be very, steady Eddie, quiet, calm. So in terms of psychological safety, we have to be aware of, take those different types of personalities into account, but also countries, like Japan or Vietnam, which are normally very quiet and will not even think of speaking up, even if asked, versus countries like Mexico and Israel that are very can be. I don't want to offend anyone. Can be quite loud. I've got very loud. So so you need to be aware when developing your psychologically safety practices, how that fits in with the culture. How are you going to implement it? So that people understand where they sit.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So with all of those pieces in mind, what would you say the leader's role is in cultivating psychological safety in an organization?
I think the first one for me is to be confident in your leadership. Okay? Don't feel threatened. Don't feel undermined when someone poses a challenge or offers an idea that you had not thought of. Okay, that's about growth.
Yeah.
Encourage a speak up culture, as I referred to before, by role modeling practices, such as genuinely listening. We don't listen in organizations. I will see people. I will be in a meeting and not say a word, and people say, "Why are you not speaking?" I said, "Well, I'm listening. Right? I'm listening to hear you. I'm not listening to get my point across. I'm not listening to impress you. I'm not listening to just give you my opinion or to interrupt you. I am listening to you." So it's called active listening. So how many people actively listen? How many leaders are generally show empathy? What is empathy? Do people understand what empathy really is? How many leaders value courage? And how many give people in the organization permission to care? How many are human? I know that sounds a funny thing because we're all human.
No.
But how do we practice humanity in our organizations?
Yeah.
A leader needs to define their organization's purpose so that everyone is really clear in their direction, and you can begin to move the culture towards one that values trust and respects each other. Trust is a really important element of creating a psychologically safe environment. and you build up trust by building up relationships as well in the organization, and demonstrating respect for each other. Set clear parameters. What counts as being open and honest in a respectful way. You know, there are levels of boundaries. You don't set out to be, just because we're asking you to stand up and speak up, it doesn't mean you are rude or you're mean or you're destructive. So make sure those boundaries are clear. And approach conflict as a means to collaborate, not as an adversary. You know, replace blame with curiosity. Ask questions. Even if they appear stupid to you, ask questions. People often don't ask. You be amazed how many people will sit in a room, sit in a meeting, and no one understands what the hell anyone is, what the presenter's saying, or what the discussion is, and everyone just nods, you know, and they go out the room and said, "Do you understand what he said or she said?
Yeah.
What was that all about?" Don't be arrogant. You can always learn from others, right?
100%.
Being open to learning from others is a sign of wanting to grow. It's a sign that you value growing, that you're not fixed, and that you're comfortable with having the status quo shaken up a bit.
Yeah.
Don't be aggressive, you know, or intimidate. And some people aren't aware that they're aggressive, actually. You know, there's a fine line between, you know, I won't go into all this. It's about aggression. We'll be here forever. But just be conscious of how you're coming across.
Yeah.
So, you know, signal wisdom, signal liberation. Reach out widely across all levels of the organization. I've only done a couple of times where, you know, people of all levels were involved in the organization, in a strategy, for example. Whereas, you know, it's not just a C-suite, or it's not just a middle management level, or so forth. No one is a skill level worker. I don't believe in that term, a low skill worker. Every worker should be valued. Every worker counts. And encourage an environment that takes constructive and sensible risks, so that innovation is fostered. Make it safe to fail. You know, those are quite a lot. I think I've given you, I don't know, maybe 10 ways that leaders can cultivate psychological safety. But they're really important.
Absolutely. And they're all things that people can just do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think they're great points to get across, and a great message. So thinking about this whole piece, this whole conversation, now we've thought about what it is, how we can do it, mistakes people make. What are the benefits of embedding a psychologically safe workplace?
So I've kind of touched on this across our conversation today, but to summarize, I guess it's fostering what I call collective intelligence. So it's bringing together the organization collectively, so that better thinking comes out of it. You know, there's higher levels of innovation. There's enhanced collaboration. The culture will be vibrant, hopefully tolerant, or more tolerant. Increased employee engagement, and good people will stay. And employees are less likely to take stress and anxiety home with them, and ultimately to burn out.
Perfect. Well, look, I think that's a really nice summary of, you know, what it is, you know, how we can go about it, what mistakes people are making, and what the benefits are. So I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add on top of that.
Yes, if people want to see read about good examples of companies that do psychological safety, there are only two to my knowledge. One is called Pixar. You know, they do all the films, animations, and the other is Bridgewater Associates. Bridgewater Associates so is a financial, I believe it's in the financial field sector, that is really brutally candid,
Wow.
right?
Okay.
And basically people either stay, they leave within 4 weeks, or they stay for life. It's so candid.
Wow. Okay.
And amongst all levels. So those are two good case studies if you'd like to read a little bit further on how it might work, what it might involve. Those two companies are good ones to look into.
Brilliant. No, that's a really helpful couple of examples for people to take away and have a look into. But look, thank you so much for your time and for coming to join me today to talk about psychological safety. And yeah, thanks, and hope everyone enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, Sylvana.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, Stephen.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
No, you're welcome.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.